The man aimed through the sniper scope, then gently adjusted for the wind, aligned with the antelope, a kilometer away, and fired a shot. The antelope was hit in the heart, but still limped away. However, John was not in a hurry. He calmly picked up the bullet casing. Based on the extent of the antelope's injury, it couldn't have gone far. He went to the spot where it was shot and followed the blood trail. But what puzzled him was that there was a fresh and thick blood trail that intersected with the antelope's blood. It's important to note that this was in the remote areas of Texas. Curious, he followed the blood trail and saw a stray dog running for its life. John was somewhat intrigued, wondering what terrifying event had caused the dog to flee into this desolate mountain. He walked in the opposite direction and, upon closer inspection, saw several cars parked haphazardly in the distance, with several bodies lying around. Holding his hunting rifle, he cautiously approached to investigate. Judging by the bodies on the ground, these people hadn't been dead for long. Not a single live dog was left at the scene. He vigilantly checked around for any survivors and approached one of the cars. He discovered that one of the people was not yet dead but dying. This person asked John for some water. Faced with this situation, John, who had been on the battlefield, remained completely calm, but he still took away the other person's assault rifle.
I think there's no water.
Seeing the magazine in his pocket, John took it as well, just in case. John opened the trunk and found half a pickup truck's worth of laundry inside. It was then he realized that the scene was a double cross, leading to a shootout between the two sides. A shootout occurred between the two sides, and there must be at least one survivor. John didn't dare to be careless. John didn't pay attention to him and instead followed the tire tracks from where they came. After walking for less than 2 kilometers, he indeed found a person lying under 2 large trees in the distance. John didn't rush over, but used his watch to time it. In this scorching summer, even if the person wasn't injured, they would definitely faint from dehydration. John waited until the afternoon, and seeing that the person still hadn't moved, he then approached with his submachine gun to check the situation. Upon getting closer, he saw that the person had been shot in the chest and had long since died from excessive blood loss. Moreover, there was a box beside the person that they wanted to take with them, even in death, indicating that it must contain something very important. John took the silver-white handgun from the person's hand and opened the box, finding it full of cash. Although John appeared calm on the surface, who wouldn't be tempted by so much cash? With this money, why would he need to hunt anymore? So, without hesitation, he left with the money. By the time he returned to his home in the small town, it was already dark. He first hid the submachine gun and handgun he brought under the house, then walked inside with the money. His wife, seeing the large box in his hand, curiously asked what was inside. John casually replied that it was money, but his wife was clearly not convinced. Late at night, John, who had obtained an ill-gotten fortune, tossed and turned. He thought about the person who was still alive, and the trace of kindness in his heart made him feel guilty. So, he took a large bucket of water and drove back to the mountains. The car and the body were still as he had seen them during the day, but when he approached the person, he found that they had been shot dead at close range. John realized something was wrong, and when he turned around, he saw that an unfamiliar car had parked in front of his own, and several people were searching for him. John was greatly alarmed and quickly hid, but the other party started the car and drove in his direction. John wanted to escape, but he was still discovered. Fortunately, it was dark and the road was uneven, so the bullets grazed his body several times. It was different. Just when Joan was exhausted, she finally escaped to a riverside, but was shot in the shoulder and fell down. Joan didn't dare to hesitate. She took off her clothes and shoes and jumped into the water, but the opponent released a vicious dog to hunt her down. Following the river downstream, the dog relentlessly pursued her. Fortunately, Joan had that silver-white handgun, and when the dog pounced, she shot it. The shoulder was only grazed by a shotgun, and it wasn't a big deal. But what he didn't expect was that the mastermind, in order to recover the 20 million in funds, hired an assassin to kill Joan. A patrolling police car caught this bowl-cut assassin because he was carrying a dangerous and modified gas pipe. The patrol officer took him back to the police station and reported the matter to his superiors, unaware that the bowl-cut was already behind him. After confirming he was alone, he used the handcuffs in his hand to tightly strangle his neck. Despite his desperate struggle, the bowl-cut wouldn't let go until he was completely dead. Afterwards, the bowl-cut calmly washed the blood off his hands. The marks left by the struggling leather shoes on the ground seemed like a beautiful piece of art. The bowl-cut picked up his weapon and then drove away in the police car. Since the police car was too conspicuous, he immediately stopped a passerby. The driver didn't know what he had done wrong. The driver saw the canister in his hand, but didn't realize it was his death sentence. The driver was shot through the head with an air gun on the spot, and the bowl-cut drove away in the other person's car, passing by a gas station along the way. However, the owner's casual remark put him in danger. The boss asked a question, and the guy with the watermelon haircut got murderous. He pulled out a coin and asked the boss to guess heads or tails. The boss didn't understand why, but he knew it wasn't a good thing, so he didn't guess. But the guy with the watermelon haircut forced him to give an answer. The light from the camera stripped the boss of his awareness, and he didn't realize he almost lost his life because of it. The guy with the watermelon haircut didn't kill indiscriminately. At night, he finally arrived at the scene of the shootout between the two sides, along with 2 henchmen of the employer. The employer and 2 of their followers were obstructing with their commands. At this time, John had already escaped home on foot. He took out a submachine gun hidden under the house and told his wife to hide at her mother's place for a while. Those people might find him based on his car. Seeing her injured husband, the wife was very worried, but she still packed her bags and left as John instructed, because a patrol officer and a driver had been killed, and the old sheriff was already investigating in these mountains. The watermelon head had already burned the driver's car. No evidence was left at the scene. However, the old sheriff discovered John's car parked in the town, and below it was the site of a gunfight between local drug dealers. The laundry detergent from the car had long been taken away. Although he knew a major shootout had occurred here, the old sheriff was not surprised. Meanwhile, the watermelon head had already traced John's car's VIN to find his home. He knocked on the door like a gentleman, but there was no response. Using an air gun, he broke in, but John and his wife had already fled. However, the watermelon head saw a communication slip on the ground. He opened the fridge to help himself to some milk. There was not a trace of expression on his face. Then, he went to the town's communication center, hoping to gather information about John from there. The staff's stubborn attitude made the man with the watermelon haircut see them in a new light. Perhaps because he saw that they were similar, both principled in their actions, he decided to spare them. At this time, John had already boarded a bus with his wife, heading to his mother-in-law's house. He asked his wife to go back first, promising to join her in a few days. Then, he took the money and found a hotel to stay in. He looked at the vent above him, noting that it could also be opened from the adjacent room. For safety, he dismantled the vent and took some cash from his suitcase as a precaution. He then stuffed the entire box of money into the ventilation duct until it reached the corner. Meanwhile, the man with the watermelon haircut was also investigating John's whereabouts. He called each number on the communication list one by one. By nightfall, as John was about to return to the inn, he noticed an extra car in the parking lot. Out of caution, he instructed the driver not to stop but to keep driving. The man with the watermelon haircut had already tracked down John and was on his way. With no outlet for the pressure he felt, he aimed his gun at the crows by the roadside. Early the next morning, John purchased a 12-gauge shotgun. He sawed off the barrel, which, although it would make aiming less accurate, would significantly increase its lethality at short range. Afterwards, he booked the adjacent room with the motel owner. He picked up the hanger to make a simple hook. He didn't know that Watermelon Head had already tracked him to the vicinity of the inn. As they got closer, the signal receiver in Watermelon Head's hands started to make noise. He drove to the entrance of the inn, and the signal receiver's noise intensified, indicating that the money was in this inn. Watermelon Head booked a room. At this time, John was prying open the vent, with the money box in the duct just around the corner. But before he could start, Watermelon Head had already taken off his shoes and was searching with his airgun and signal receiver. He went to the room John first opened, while John was next door slowly hooking the money box out of the vent.
Though Watermelon Head had fitted a silencer on his gun, John still noticed the slight noise. These people were the ones who came to the inn last night looking for the money box, but they found nothing in John's room.
These 3 were sent by the employer to find the money box. Just like before, Watermelon Head killed them all, then searched the entire house, but still couldn't find any trace of the money box. He opened the vent and saw clear drag marks from the money box. By this time, John had already taken the money box, gotten into a taxi, and escaped to the other side of the city. The employer was furious as his men were being killed one after another by Watermelon Head. Fearing that Watermelon Head might pocket the money himself, he hired another new assassin to kill him. The new assassin was aware of how dangerous Watermelon Head was. He didn't dare confront him directly, but the employer offered too much money to resist. John had been on the run for an entire day and would reach the border by tomorrow. At night, he found a new motel to stay in. This time, he was cautious and bribed the front desk with $100 to notify him if any new guests checked in. He had trouble sleeping at night, wondering how they could track him down so accurately, despite his long escape. So, he opened the money box to search carefully and discovered a tracker hidden among the stack of money. But before he could destroy it, a slight noise from outside made him instantly alert. He called the front desk to inquire, but received no response. Realizing something was wrong, John took out the 12-gauge shotgun he had bought in advance and sat on the bed aiming at the door. After some thought, he turned off the lamp. It wasn't long before a shadow appeared at his door. However, before John could react, the figure moved away, and then the lights in the entire hallway went out. John fired a shot and ran with the cash box. He first threw the cash box out the window, and just as he was about to jump, a bullet grazed his ear. Fortunately, it didn't hit him. John, not daring to expose himself, grabbed the cash box again and hid inside the inn. The front desk clerk had already been killed, so he escaped through the back door of the inn. A bullet pierced through his waist, but he didn't dare delay, and once again ran into the street with the cash. Seeing a car approaching, he hurriedly stopped it and got in.
Don't worry, I won't hurt you.
The car crashed on the roadside, so he had to get out again and find a hidden place to hide, just waiting for the opponent to come over, and then counterattack the opponent. From the reflection in the window, he saw the person with the bowl cut walking towards the crashed car, but he noticed the bloodstains from John's injury dripping on the ground. John's 12-gauge shotgun played a significant role, and the person with the bowl cut was injured and fled. Neither side gained much from this battle, but it made the person with the bowl cut realize that John was not an ordinary prey. He endured the pain and drove to the border, but crossing the border like this would definitely arouse suspicion. Ahead, 3 ordinary people were walking towards him, thinking John had been in a car accident. John didn't answer. He just spent $500 to buy their clothes, and then bought the beer they were holding. Out of caution, John threw the money box under the border fence. The border guards thought he was a fool and didn't stop him. He then paid someone to take him to the hospital. Meanwhile, the person with the bowl cut was in a bad situation. Afraid to go to the hospital, he endured the night until the pharmacy opened. He lit a piece of cloth and placed it at the car's gas tank opening, then went to the pharmacy. Suddenly, a violent explosion drew everyone's attention, and he limped away with some medicine. John, who was in the hospital, was startled awake by the commotion. It turned out that the new assassin hired by the employer had already found John. His tracking ability was extremely strong. The new assassin was very surprised that John had survived the encounter with the bowl cut guy. He told John to give him the money, suggesting that it might be his only chance to live. How could John possibly give away the money he risked his life to earn? Without a second thought, John refused him. However, the new assassin said that the bowl cut guy would never give up so easily. John's actions had already angered the bowl cut guy, and now not only John was doomed, even his runaway wife would be implicated.
You don't understand. You can't make a deal with him. Even if you gave him the money back, he'd still kill you just for the inconvenience. He's a peculiar man.
The hitman was clearly not giving up. He followed John's escape route looking for clues, and finally found traces of the money box under the border fence. However, he didn't retrieve it immediately. Just as he returned to the inn, the man with the watermelon haircut appeared behind him. Facing this ruthless and extremely principled man with the watermelon haircut, the new hitman was very intimidated. He wanted to use all his possessions, over $14,000, plus the $20 million in cash, to buy his own life. But the man with the watermelon haircut did not agree. At that moment, the phone suddenly rang, and the man with the watermelon haircut immediately shot the new hitman. The call was from John, who, after much thought, decided to hand over the money to ensure the safety of himself and his wife. That's the best deal I'm going to get. Faced with the threat from the watermelon head, John was furious, but he didn't dare to gamble with his wife's life. After leaving the hospital, he went under the protective net to retrieve the guitar case, then called his wife, John, asking her to take the money box and hide. He planned to deal with the watermelon head's trouble first before finding her. The watermelon head didn't seek revenge on John, but instead found his own employer first and shot him twice. After receiving John's notification, his wife immediately took her mother to the location John specified. But just as his wife was buying tickets, a Mexican man kindly helped the elderly lady with her luggage. Seeing how gentlemanly he was, the elderly lady told him their intended destination. Shortly after, John had already arrived at the place, waiting for his wife and mother-in-law to arrive. However, before he could see his wife, he was shot dead by a group of Mexicans, and the money box was taken away. By the time his wife arrived, it was too late. She had just buried her husband when the watermelon head came knocking. She didn't expect John's wife to be so beautiful and charming. The wife claimed she didn't get the money. The money for John's burial was all borrowed. In the end, Watermelon Head didn't harm John's wife. Just as he was driving away, 2 boys on bicycles followed him. He watched cautiously, as the 2 were quite sudden. Watermelon Head staggered out of the car, his hand bone already fractured, and the 2 boys approached him.